All right, today we're taking a trip back in time. We're going to look at what was one of the very first sex ed films shown to kids. We're talking 12 and 13-year-olds in the 1960s. And to guide us, we have the expert commentary of a modern OBGYN, Dr. Jones, who's going to help us see what they got right, what was, well, hilariously wrong, and what was just dangerously left out.
So where do we even begin? Well, there's really no better place to start than with Dr. Jones's gut reaction to the film's vocabulary. Mating? I mean, come on. Right off the bat, that one word just perfectly sets the strange kind of detached tone for this whole thing.
So the film starts out pretty simply, right? It gets into the basics of growing up, comparing how boys and girls start to develop in their early teens. It seems straightforward enough, but you can already start to see the assumptions of the time creeping in.
And right away, you see this huge difference in how we think about things. Back then, it was just a simple classroom observation. But Dr. Jones points out that when you say it, girls are more mature, even if you mean physically, you're tying it to a social idea. It reinforces this expectation for girls to be the responsible ones, which can, down the line, create a space for misogyny to take root. Next up, they try to tackle the science of puberty, and they kind of boil it all down to just one male and one female sex hormone running the whole show. Now, Dr. Jones is quick to say that's a massive oversimplification, but she also gives them a little bit of a pass here, saying that for 12-year-olds, maybe simplifying that complex hormonal soup was a deliberate choice to make it understandable. Okay, so from there, we get into the real meat of it, their explanation for reproduction. And yep, this is where we get back to that wonderfully weird word mating and dive into what they knew, or what they thought they knew, about how it all works back in the 60s. Yeah, so the old film kind of just glosses over all the details, but Dr. Jones is here to give us the amazing play-by-play of what actually happens. Once an embryo implants, it starts making a hormone called HCG. That hormone basically sends a rescue signal to the ovary to keep making progesterone. The progesterone keeps the uterine lining intact, and this whole delicate dance keeps the pregnancy going until the placenta is ready to take over around 9 weeks later. It's just so cool. Okay, this next one is hilarious. Dr. Jones's reaction to how the film describes the fetus getting food is just perfect. The film says the baby depends on the mother's blood for food. The phrasing is so clinical and kind of creepy that, yeah, vampire is honestly the perfect comparison. It just shows how your choice of words can make a totally natural thing sound pretty sinister. And this is so important. It's not just about the science, it's about the language we use. The 1960s film makes fertilization sound like a battle, with the sperm breaking through the egg's defenses. But the modern way of looking at it, as Dr. Jones explains, gives the egg agency. It's not just sitting there, it's an active participant that allows the right sperm to enter. It's a subtle shift in wording, but a massive shift in perspective. All right, so we've had some fun with the awkward phrasing, but this is where Dr. Jones's analysis gets really serious. It's not about what the film said anymore, it's about what it didn't say, and how leaving things out could cause real fear and confusion. So you gotta put yourself in the shoes of a 12-year-old watching this. The film says if an egg doesn't meet a sperm cell, you get a period. Well, what's the next logical question in your head? Wait, how do they meet? What do I have to avoid so they don't meet by accident? It's a huge gap that a kid's imagination is just going to fill with anxiety. And this, Dr. Jones points out, is exactly why being vague to protect kids just doesn't work. By not explaining the how, you're not actually educating them. You're just making the whole thing mysterious and scary. It leads to fears about simple things like holding hands, total confusion about their own bodies, and a ton of anxiety, all because they weren't given clear, basic information. And if you thought that was vague, get a load of how they describe menstruation. A little blood leaves the body. I mean, wow. Talk about an understatement. That sets up a wildly unrealistic expectation for what a first period is actually like. And just think about the impact of that. Dr. Jones puts it perfectly. If your only info was a little blood, you'd be expecting maybe a tiny scrape. So when you get your first real period, the actual amount of blood could be so shocking that you'd legitimately think you are seriously hurt or dying. That's terrifying. So you might be wondering, okay, why are we digging up this 60-year-old film? Well, the answer is that this kind of education, this approach full of gaps and shame, it had a lasting impact that Dr. Jones still sees in her own patients today. You know, we have to remember, this film didn't just appear in a vacuum. It was a product of its time. The silence on so many topics wasn't an accident.
It reflected a whole culture where things like sex and periods were completely taboo. You just did not talk about them openly.
And that legacy is something Dr. Jones sees every single day in her practice. Adults who are raised with that foundation of shame are often way too embarrassed to talk to a doctor about their reproductive health, and that can mean people avoid getting necessary care, which just keeps that cycle of fear and bad information going for another generation.
But let's not end on a down note. To wrap things up, let's look at just how much science has learned since the 60s. The film actually raised some questions that it couldn't answer back then, but today, we have some incredible answers.
Here's a fun one. The narrator in the original film actually asks this question out loud, but then, crickets, no answer. They probably just didn't know. But today, Dr. Jones can tell us exactly what happens, and it's both fascinating and really serious. So the answer is something called a molar pregnancy. This is when an egg gets fertilized by 2 sperm, and you end up with the wrong number of chromosomes, 69 instead of the usual 46. It's not a viable pregnancy, and it can actually lead to some really serious health issues, even a type of cancer. It's a perfect example of the mind-blowing complexity we've uncovered since this film was made.
Okay, another question. Why are there literally millions of sperm? The film has a pretty basic answer, to increase the odds, which isn't wrong. But Dr. Jones's take is, well, it's a lot more direct and way more memorable.
And there it is. The reason, she says, is that sperm are stupid. I mean, her words. But her point is that you need a massive team because so many of them are just not good at their job. They can't swim straight, some go backwards, tons of them get lost. You basically need millions of them just to make sure one competent one finds its way. So looking back at all this, it's more than just a laugh at some old, awkward film, right? It's a really powerful look at how far we've come. And it leaves us with a really important question for today. How do we make sure that the way we teach kids about their own bodies continues to evolve, so it's built on clarity, not confusion, and empowerment, not shame? Really makes you think. Thanks for joining us.